Even as we grieve, we give thanks for this most faithful life. I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities.
From the outside, Buckingham Palace looks exactly as it always has. The guards still march, the flags still fly. The tourists still press against the railings with their cameras raised, waiting for some flicker of movement behind the gilded gates. But inside those walls, in the corridors and drawing rooms that the public never sees, something is happening that has no modern precedent in the history of the British monarchy. A transfer of power is underway, and the man it is transferring to has not yet been crowned. King Charles III is still officially the monarch. His portrait hangs in government buildings across the Commonwealth. His signature appears on state documents. His face is being pressed onto new currency. By every formal, legal, constitutional measure, he is king. But sources close to the royal family are now saying something that would have been unthinkable even 2 years ago. Charles has, in the words of one royal commentator, all but handed over the crown. He prefers not to be involved in the difficult decisions, even as those decisions threaten the very survival of the institution he has devoted his life to. Prince William, heir to the throne, husband to the Princess of Wales, father to the future king, is not waiting. He is not standing respectfully at his father's shoulder, offering advice when asked, playing the patient long game that princes of Wales have played for centuries. He is making decisions. He is issuing demands. He is drawing lines that he expects everyone in the family, including the current queen consort, to respect. And the person who set all of this in motion, the catalyst who accelerated a succession that was always coming but was never supposed to happen quite like this, is a man who is currently facing the prospect of spending the rest of his life in prison. On February 19th, 2026, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was arrested. It was his 66th birthday. Thames Valley Police arrived at his temporary cottage on the Sandringham estate and took him into custody on suspicion of misconduct in public office, specifically that while serving as the UK's special trade representative, he had passed sensitive government documents to Jeffrey Epstein. He was held for 11 hours. He was released without charge, meaning the investigation is ongoing, but the arrest itself was already historic. He became the first senior member of the British royal family to be arrested in modern times. And in that moment, everything inside Buckingham Palace shifted. Not loudly, not with any public announcement or dramatic declaration, but in the way that institutions shift when a crisis finally confirms what the most clear-eyed people inside them have been saying for years. William had been warning about Andrew since 2019. He had been pushing for decisive action since the catastrophic BBC Newsnight interview. He had told both King Charles and the late Queen Elizabeth that Andrew needed to be removed from royal duties immediately, that protecting the monarchy had to take precedence over protecting one man. That delay would cost them more than decisive action ever could. He was ignored. The Queen wanted to protect her son. Charles felt torn, and William waited. He does not appear to be waiting anymore. What is happening inside the palace right now is not simply a family navigating a crisis. It is a fundamental reordering of who holds power, who sets strategy, and who gets to determine what the British monarchy looks like for the next generation. And caught in the middle of that reordering in a position that grows more uncomfortable by the week is Queen Camilla. The woman who spent decades waiting to become queen consort is now watching that role be quietly and systematically hollowed out. Not by her husband, by his son. This is the story of William's quiet revolution. The power moves, the ultimatums, the battle between the future queen and the current one, and a succession plan that is accelerating far more quickly than anyone outside the palace's innermost circle anticipated. To understand the speed of what is happening, you have to understand the physical reality of King Charles's situation. He became king in September 2022 at the age of 73, the oldest person ever to ascend the British throne. He had waited longer than anyone in history for that moment, and by the time it arrived, the years were already visible on him. but nobody could have anticipated how quickly the challenges would accumulate. In February 2024, just 17 months into his reign, Charles was diagnosed with cancer. The specific type has not been publicly disclosed, but treatment began immediately and continued throughout 2024 and into 2025. Then, in March 2024, came a second blow. Princess Kate announced her own cancer diagnosis following abdominal surgery, revealing she had been undergoing preventative chemotherapy. In the space of a few weeks, both the king and the wife of the heir to the throne were simultaneously in treatment. The emotional and institutional weight of that reality is difficult to overstate. Sources cited by Closer Weekly reported that Charles was already considering transferring significant responsibilities to William by 2025 or 2026. Palace officials publicly denied any imminent transition. But the actions told a different story. In 2025, Charles granted William and Kate the authority to issue royal warrants, the ability to publicly endorse products and brands on behalf of the crown. This privilege had been jealously protected by previous monarchs. Handing it to the heir while still king was not a routine administrative adjustment. It was a signal. One royal source told News International that Charles is not merely helping William realize his potential, but actively guiding him through decisions that will define the institution for decades. The unspoken truth beneath all the careful palace language is this. At 77 years old, fighting cancer, having buried his mother and inherited her crown, Charles understands that his reign may be shorter than anyone wants to acknowledge publicly. The succession plan is not a distant horizon. It is the present reality, unfolding in real time, with or without a formal announcement. William recognized the threat that Andrew posed long before the rest of the family was willing to act. According to Russell Myers, author of William and Catherine, palace aides had been raising concerns about Andrew's behavior for years, and William took those warnings seriously in a way that others did not. After the 2019 Newsnight disaster, the pizza restaurant alibi, the baffling justifications, the complete absence of empathy for Epstein's victims, William went directly to Charles and to the late Queen Elizabeth with a clear position. Andrew needed to be stripped of his royal duties immediately. The longer the family waited, the more damage they were absorbing. He stressed, according to Myers, that public confidence in the monarchy was hanging by a thread, and that protecting the institution had to take precedence over protecting any individual within it, regardless of blood ties. At the time, his warnings were largely set aside. The Queen, in the final years of her life, was reluctant to act with the severity her grandson was advocating. Charles, then still Prince of Wales, was caught between loyalty to his mother and genuine alarm about his brother's conduct. William was outvoted by sentiment. Now, in 2026, with his father as king and managing an ongoing cancer diagnosis, William's voice carries a weight it never had before. Sources say he has been central to every major decision about Andrew over the past 6 months: the stripping of titles in October 2025, the termination of the Royal Lodge lease, the complete severing of Andrew from the institution. This is not insider stress, Charles acting alone and William offering occasional input. This is William leading the strategy, with Charles providing the formal authority that makes it legally and constitutionally possible. The way William has handled the Andrew crisis reveals something important about the kind of monarchy he intends to build. His vision, shared with associates and hinted at in public conversations, represents a significant departure from anything the institution has known in its modern form. He wants the monarchy to function less like an ancient hereditary court and more like a well-run contemporary organization, transparent, accountable, structurally clear, and intolerant of the kind of protected dysfunction that allowed the Andrew situation to fester for years before anyone took decisive action. His model already exists. In miniature, in the Royal Foundation, the charity he runs with Kate, it has a chief executive, it has a board of directors. It sets measurable goals and reports publicly on its progress. The opacity that has historically shielded royal operations from scrutiny is simply not part of how William runs things when he has the freedom to build from scratch. His management of the Duchy of Cornwall, The vast estate he inherited when Charles became king follows the same philosophy. People familiar with his approach describe him as someone who consistently questions inherited ways of doing things, who demands to understand the rationale behind every established practice before accepting it. In October 2025, in a candid conversation with Canadian actor Eugene Levy, William said simply that change was on his agenda, while acknowledging the specific difficulty of that challenge. The institution he is preparing to lead is one whose entire symbolic value rests on continuity, on being the thing that does not change, while everything around it does. Any transformation he engineers has to be real enough to matter, and subtle enough not to alarm the traditionalists whose support the monarchy depends on. One former royal aide compared the monarchy to a jar of Marmite, observing that while the label has looked essentially the same for generations, the contents have been quietly and continuously replaced. William has told his associates directly that his position on scandal will be absolute. Anyone who brings reputational damage to the monarchy, regardless of their personal relationship to him, regardless of how long they have been part of the institution, regardless of how uncomfortable the severance might be, will be removed. No exceptions for family. No prioritizing of personal loyalty over institutional stability. The Andrew situation did not create this philosophy. It confirmed it. Which brings us to the complication nobody predicted. The most significant resistance to William's agenda is not coming from aging courtiers or traditionalist peers or tabloid editors nostalgic for a different era. It is coming from inside the family. And it is coming from Queen Camilla. Camilla and Sarah Ferguson have been friends since the 1970s. This is not a recent or superficial connection. It predates both women's entry into royal life, predates their marriages, predates decades of public scrutiny and personal upheaval. It is the kind of friendship that was formed before either of them had any reason to imagine they would one day be navigating the politics of the British crown. For Camilla, it is, by all accounts, one of the genuine personal loyalties of her life. William reportedly does not care. According to Radar Online, he has made his position clear. The only safe strategy is complete and immediate separation from both Sarah Ferguson and Andrew. Not a quiet cooling of ties, not a gradual public distancing, a clean, visible, unambiguous break. His reasoning is straightforward. Ferguson's name appears in the Epstein files released by the United States Department of Justice. Emails show she had contact with Epstein and appeared to request financial assistance from him when her businesses were struggling. In one message from October 2009, she reportedly wrote urgently asking for £20,000. William's view is that if the Queen Consort is publicly associated with someone whose name is embedded in those documents, the damage to the monarchy's credibility is direct and unavoidable. Camilla sees it differently. She has pushed back on what she considers the fundamental unfairness of being asked to abandon a decades-long friendship because of guilt by association. She has argued that Sarah Ferguson has not been charged with any crime, that the emails in the Epstein files do not constitute evidence of wrongdoing, and that ending a private friendship based on proximity to a scandal sets a troubling precedent. The fact that Camilla herself played a role in the October 2025 decision to strip Andrew of his titles, reports suggest she was instrumental in that decision, precisely because Andrew had been undermining her work with survivors of sexual abuse only makes her position more nuanced. She acted against Andrew when she felt it was right to do so. She does not believe that action obliges her to also discard Sarah. The gap between William's position and Camilla's has widened into an open and increasingly visible rift. Sources say that Sarah Ferguson herself had expected Camilla to offer some form of public support, even something as simple as being seen together. That support has not arrived, leaving Ferguson feeling abandoned by the one person in the royal family she believed would stand by her, and leaving Camilla caught between two conflicting loyalties with no clean way to honor both. Beneath the William and Camilla conflict, a second and arguably more personal power struggle has been developing, one that sources describe as a genuine rivalry rather than a strategic disagreement. The tension between Kate, Princess of Wales, and Queen Camilla has been building quietly for years. The events of early 2026 have brought it to the surface in ways that are difficult to ignore. When Andrew was arrested, Kate moved. Sources from the National Examiner describe her working intensively in the days that followed, coordinating with palace staff on the public response, consulting legal advisors, helping to shape the strategy for managing the fallout in a way that protected William's position and the monarchy's standing. She was functioning, in practical terms, less like a princess in waiting and more like a co-chief executive managing an institutional crisis. Camilla did not welcome this. Insiders say she felt deeply threatened by Kate's involvement, interpreting it as a signal to the world that she and Charles were unable to handle the situation without assistance from the younger generation. One source put it plainly: Camilla thinks the last thing Charles needs is for Kate to make it appear that he requires help managing his own house. She has reportedly been visibly tense whenever Kate enters a room, has accused Kate of making both her and Charles look incapable, and has made her displeasure known within palace circles with increasing openness. Charles, for his part, appears to side with his daughter-in-law. The same source notes that he defends Kate whenever Camilla raises objections, pointing out that Kate's involvement is motivated by a genuine desire to help rather than any intent to undermine. This dynamic, the king defending his son's wife against his own wife's criticisms, is not a comfortable one, and it appears to be making Camilla's isolation within the decision-making structure more pronounced. The contrast in their public positioning became impossible to ignore after Andrew's arrest. It was Kate who appeared alongside William at public engagements in the days that followed, projecting stability and confidence. Camilla was present at official functions but absent from the visible crisis response. The optics were not accidental. They were a reflection of a power structure that has already shifted significantly from what it was when Charles was crowned. Camilla's difficulties deepened in February 2026, when she met with French abuse survivor Gisèle Pellicot as part of her ongoing work, supporting victims of S-time sexual violence. The gesture was genuine, but the public reception was corrosive. Social media responses were swift and merciless. Critics accused her of profound hypocrisy, arguing that she could not credibly champion abuse survivors in public while maintaining a private friendship with someone whose name appeared in the Epstein files. Whether that criticism was fair or not is almost beside the point. The damage was real, and it fed directly into William's argument that the association was costing the institution more than it was worth. In late February 2026, the simmering conflict between William and Camilla reached a point that sources describe as a direct confrontation. William reportedly presented Camilla with what amounted to an ultimatum. She needed to publicly distance herself from Sarah Ferguson, not quietly, not gradually, but visibly and unambiguously. This was not framed as a request or a recommendation. It was, in the language of one insider who spoke to multiple outlets, a strong demand from the future king to the current queen consort. The significance of that dynamic cannot be overstated. In the conventional architecture of the British monarchy, the heir to the throne does not issue ultimatums to the queen consort. The hierarchy does not run that way, but these are not conventional times, and the hierarchy has been quietly redrawn. Sources indicate that Charles has effectively given William authority over all decisions connected to the Andrew scandal and the broader question of the monarchy's reputational management. This means that in the specific domain where the conflict with Camilla is playing out, William is not operating as an heir overstepping his role. He is operating as someone whose authority has been formally, if quietly, expanded. Camilla finds herself in a position that has no easy resolution. If she complies with William's demand and publicly severs ties with Sarah Ferguson, she is acknowledging that the future king has authority over her personal relationships, a precedent with implications that extend far beyond this single friendship. If she refuses, she risks being progressively excluded from the decision-making structures that give her role its substance, reduced to ceremonial appearances, while the real business of running the monarchy happens around her. William has apparently made his contingency plan clear. If Camilla will not accept the new parameters, he is prepared to work around her, to reduce her influence through the practical mechanisms available to him, and ultimately to wait. He will be king. Kate will be queen consort, At that point, the institutional architecture Camilla has been defending will simply no longer exist. The question of whether she ends a 50-year friendship will be moot. What is emerging from all of this is a picture of the monarchy that William intends to build, and it looks markedly different from anything the institution has produced in its modern history. The working royal family will be smaller. The circle of people permitted to formally represent the crown will be tighter and more carefully managed. The tolerance for scandal, regardless of how it arrives and regardless of who brings it, will be effectively zero. The culture of backroom decision-making, of aristocratic courtiers wielding influence without accountability, of family members being protected from consequences that would end any ordinary person's career. All of that is, in William's vision, finished. The monarchy will be run with clear reporting structures, professional management, and a transparency that previous generations of royals would have found deeply uncomfortable. Merit will determine influence. Conduct will determine standing. The accident of birth will still determine who wears the crown, but it will no longer insulate anyone from the consequences of their actions. Kate's role in this future is central. She is already functioning as a co-strategist, already visible in the spaces where real decisions are made, already trusted with crisis management at the highest level. When she becomes queen consort, sources suggest her role will be substantially more active and influential than the one Camilla currently occupies. This is not a criticism of Camilla, it is a reflection of the different institutional moment into which each woman married. Camilla entered a monarchy still organized around its old hierarchies. Kate is helping to build the one that replaces them. The months ahead are, by every account from within the palace, critical. The Andrew criminal investigation remains active. New revelations from the Epstein files continue to surface. The calls for Charles to step down, while not yet mainstream, are present enough to register. If the monarchy can demonstrate, through its handling of the Andrew crisis, that it is capable of genuine accountability and meaningful change, it may emerge from this period with its credibility, not just intact, but reinforced. If it stumbles, if the impression takes hold that nothing has really changed and that the institution is still primarily in the business of protecting its own, the calls for abolition that have been growing in volume for years will become significantly harder to dismiss. Here's where things stand as of spring 2026. King Charles is officially the monarch, but the man making the strategic decisions about the monarchy's future is his son. Queen Camilla is officially the queen consort, but the woman shaping the institutional response to the most serious crisis in a generation is her daughter-in-law. The old generation holds the titles. The new generation holds the power. And the distance between those two facts is growing wider every week. William did not arrive at this position through a dramatic coup or a public confrontation. He got here the slow way, through years of being right about things that the people above him refused to act on, through the quiet accumulation of influence that comes from being the person in the room who is most consistently looking at the long term rather than the immediate, through a crisis that finally made his arguments impossible to ignore. Andrew's arrest on his 66th birthday did not give William power. It revealed the power he had already been building. For Camilla, the situation is one of the more poignant ironies in recent royal history. She waited decades to become queen consort. She endured years of public hostility, of being cast as the villain in the most beloved love story of her generation, of carrying the weight of a reputation that had been formed in the worst possible circumstances. She finally got the title, the palace, the formal recognition, and now she is watching the role be quietly redefined around her by a man who was not even born when she first entered the world that shaped her. The British monarchy has survived centuries of scandal, war, abdication, and reinvention. It has lost kings and buried queens and remade itself after every convulsion that should have finished it. Whether it survives this particular moment, the arrested prince, the toxic files, the health of an aging king, the impatience of his heir depends almost entirely on whether William's instincts are right and whether the institution can move fast enough to get ahead of its own history. The quiet revolution is already underway. The old guard is still in the building, but they are no longer running it. And whether you believe that is exactly what the monarchy needs, or the beginning of something it will come to regret? The one thing nobody can argue with is this: whatever the British royal family looks like 10 years from now will be shaped by decisions being made right now, in those corridors, in those drawing rooms, by a man who has been waiting a very long time and is done with waiting. Is William right to draw hard lines, even when they cut through the personal loyalties of people he lives alongside? Should Camilla be expected to choose the institution over a friendship she has held for half a century? And could all of this, the tension, the ultimatums, the accelerating transfer of authority, push Charles towards stepping down sooner than any of them have publicly admitted? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want to follow where this goes next, subscribe now, because the next chapter of this story is already being written.